I'm Catherine Millard. In 1984, I founded Christian Heritage Tours here in our nation's capital. Its purpose is to present the rich Christian foundation upon which the United States of America was built. After leading many people on tours of the sites in our nation's capital, I realized something was amiss. Far too many otherwise intelligent Americans were confused by misconceptions, lies, and contradictory reports concerning the founding period of American history. Later, as I expanded the work into the schools of this nation through Christian Heritage Ministries, I discovered that our school children, as well as some teachers, are no better informed. That led me into the study of school textbooks. I was shocked to learn the extent to which America's history had been rewritten, how the great Christian truths and values had been removed and replaced by a godless philosophy and an anti-Christian sentiment. The result has been a generation with no understanding of the glorious biblical liberties of the nation, neither how we got them, nor how we will maintain them. On this video, I will answer some of the frequently asked questions I get as I travel presenting seminars on our heritage. We will concentrate on issues relating to Thomas Jefferson, author of the Declaration of Independence. One of the most asked questions is, what about separation of church and state? To begin, it's important to understand that the phrase separation of church and state does not appear in our nation's Declaration of Independence, Constitution, or any other official document by the Founding Fathers. Thomas Jefferson is the famous author of the Declaration of Independence. However, not many are aware that he also authored the Act for Establishing Religious Freedom, which was passed into law by the state of Virginia in 1786. Jefferson listed it next to the Declaration of Independence as his second greatest accomplishment. At the time, the state of Virginia had established the Anglican Church as the official state-supported church. This practice had been commonplace in Europe. For example, in England, the Anglican denomination was the established church. In Germany, it was the Lutheran Church. People would be taxed by the government to support such Protestant denominations, or religions, as the founders called them. But Jefferson fought against his state's government-supported religion. He believed that each individual should be free to contribute according to his conscience to any Christian church or pastor of his own choosing. He also believed that one's denomination should not in any way determine one's suitability for civil government. The following is quoted from Jefferson's Act for Establishing Religious Freedom. Well aware that Almighty God hath created the mind free, that all attempts to influence it by temporal punishments and burdens or by civil incapacitations tend only to beget habits of hypocrisy and meanness, and are a departure from the plan of the holy author of our religion, who, being Lord of both body and mind, yet chose not to propagate it by coercions on either, as was in his almighty power to do. That the impious presumption of legislators and rulers civil, as well as ecclesiastical, who being themselves but fallible and uninspired men, have assumed dominion over the faith of others, setting up their own opinions and modes of thinking as the only true and fallible, and as such endeavoring to impose them on others, hath established and maintained false religions over the greatest part of the world and through all time. That to compel a man to furnish contributions of money for the propagation of opinions which he disbelieves is sinful and tyrannical, that even the forcing him to support this or that teacher of his religious persuasion is depriving him of the comfortable liberty of giving his contributions to the particular pastor whose morals he would like to pattern and whose powers he feels most persuasive to righteousness. Be it therefore enacted by the General Assembly that no man shall be compelled to frequent or support any religious worship, place, or ministry whatsoever, nor shall be enforced, restrained, molested, or burdened in body or goods, nor shall otherwise suffer on account of his religious opinions or belief. Thus, more accurate wording for the hackneyed phrase, greatly promoted by the media, separation of church and state, would be separation of church from interference by the state. Another question that I am frequently asked concerns Jefferson's personal religious persuasion or lack thereof. Many assume he was a deist. According to Noah Webster's 1828 dictionary definition, a deist is one who believes in the existence of a God but denies revealed religion, one who professes no form of religion but follows the light of nature and reason as his only guides in doctrine and practice, a freethinker. Many who label Jefferson a deist or anti-Christian have likely based their conclusions upon the controversy with some of the clergy of the day over his act for establishing religious freedom. One result of it was the disestablishment of the Anglican state-controlled church as the state religion. He was misrepresented and maligned by some who were not able to grasp the long-range effects of his bill. Jefferson understood, and history has proved him right, that true Christianity would prosper without the aid of civil government. He stood for what he believed, in spite of severe opposition and misunderstanding of his own character. In a letter to Mrs. Harrison Smith in 1816, he wrote that the priests indeed have heretofore thought proper to ascribe to me religious, or rather anti-religious sentiments of their fabric, but such as soothe their resentment against the act of Virginia for establishing religious freedom. They wished him to be thought atheist, deist, or devil, who would advocate freedom from their religious dictations. But I've ever thought religion a concern purely between our God and our consciences, for which we are accountable to him, and not to the priests. We do have evidence of Thomas Jefferson's regular participation in church services of his day. He was a vestryman at St. Anne's Episcopal Parish Church when at his home Monticello in Charlottesville. Records show that he attended Christ Episcopal Church in Philadelphia with other founding fathers, and while a delegate to the House of Burgesses in Williamsburg, Virginia, he attended Bruton Parish Episcopal Church with other founders of the American Republic. However one wishes to interpret Jefferson's religious beliefs, the fact is that he himself believed he was a Christian, and history bears out that Jefferson had a great interest in the Bible and Christianity. While we do not have written evidence that Thomas Jefferson accepted Jesus Christ as his personal Lord and Savior, the only way to salvation, we can affirm that he governed his life by many Christian values and principles, as borne out by his original letters, writings, documents, and addresses. Jefferson's library, now part of the rare book collection of the Library of Congress, included 190 books under the title of Religion. It includes numerous Bibles in both modern and original languages, concordances, Bible dictionaries, histories. In addition, it includes Jefferson's well-worn, beautifully leather-bound, 4-volume personal Bible. The Librarian of Congress is sworn into office upon this Bible. On June the 28th, 1826, as Jefferson laid upon his deathbed at Monticello, Dr. Benjamin Rush, his physician, predicted that he would not live through the night. However, Jefferson prayed that he might survive to celebrate the Jubilee of the Declaration of Independence on July the 4th. His prayer was answered. Jefferson died at 10 minutes to 1 o'clock on July the 4th, 1826, at the time the Declaration of Independence had been publicly read in 1776. Jefferson's close friend, John Adams, a champion of the Declaration of Independence, died just 5 hours later. Jefferson's last words, which he uttered distinctly 2 times, were the words prayed by Simeon in Luke 2:29, "Lord, now lettest thou thy servant depart in peace." Did Thomas Jefferson write his own Bible? No, he did not. But let me explain what he did write, and how the widely accepted myth about the Jefferson Bible was started years after his death. As a personal exercise, Jefferson compiled a collection of Bible verses called The Life and Morals of Jesus of Nazareth, extracted textually from the Gospels in Greek, Latin, French, and English. The table of contents reads, a table of the texts from the evangelists employed in this narrative and the order of their arrangement. Jefferson merely quoted Bible verses word for word with notation of chapters and verses on the teachings of Christ. He did not include any commentary or personal opinion in the collection. Furthermore, there was only one copy made of the book, which is now in the archives of the Smithsonian Institution, a museum item. He never published it, nor was it even a part of his extensive library of over 6,000 volumes. What then was the source of the myth of the Jefferson Bible? In 1904, the 57th Congress of the United States ordered the printing of 9,000 copies of Jefferson's Life and Morals for use of the Senate and House of Representatives. However, it was done under the erroneous title of the Jefferson Bible. It included a new introduction by Dr. Cyrus Adler, librarian of the Smithsonian Institution. In this 1904 version, Jefferson's original title page and table of contents were removed, as were the chapters and verses utilized in Jefferson's original, and the text was written in narrative form. The reprinting of Jefferson's original single copy of the teachings of Jesus took place 78 years after his death. This action on the part of Congress was obviously a positive commentary. However, it resulted in the myth of the Jefferson Bible. In the fall of 1998, the Washington Post and many other national newspapers carried articles stating that DNA evidence taken from an alleged direct descendant of Field Jefferson, an uncle to Thomas Jefferson, appeared to prove that Thomas Jefferson had fathered a child of Sally Hemings, who was a slave on his plantation. The retired pathologist from the University of Virginia who had made the assertion published his article in the November 5 issue of Nature magazine. Both Science magazine and Nature magazine, however, in January 1999, carried disclaimers stating that the father of the child could have been any of numerous men named Jefferson living at that time. They stated that the most likely candidate was Randolph Jefferson, a widower and the younger brother by 12 years of Thomas Jefferson. It is historically recorded that Randolph Jefferson was frequently seen at Monticello dancing and playing the fiddle with the slaves, and that he was a guest at Monticello in August 1807, 9 months prior to Eston Hemings's birth, as well as being there 6 days after he was born on May the 27th, 1808. DNA experts worldwide from universities of Oxford, Harvard, Bern, Leicester, Leiden, Colorado, and others have successfully refuted the Virginia pathologist's 1998 article as lacking scientific proof via Field Jefferson and uncle's DNA. No newspaper reported the revised version of the story, and Jefferson's reputation has been left tarnished by the liberal American media. This leads to the third issue. If the founding fathers were Christians, why did they permit slavery? In 1619, the Dutch brought the first slaves to the colonies, selling them to planters in Virginia. The British Crown not only permitted this importation of slaves from Africa, but blocked attempts by some colonies to prevent further importation of slaves through duties and prohibitions. In 1759, George Mason became a member of the Virginia House of Burgesses and took a firm stand against slavery. He drafted the Non-Importation Association. Listen to this quote taken from the resolves adopted in Fairfax County. During our present difficulties and distress, no slaves ought to be imported into any of the British colonies on this continent, and we take this opportunity of declaring our most earnest wishes to see an entire stop forever put to such a wicked, cruel, and unnatural trade. Thomas Jefferson himself expressed the concern of colonists on the slavery issue, and England's response in his famous 1774 a summary view of the rights of British America given to the Convention of Delegates in the House of Burgesses in Williamsburg, Virginia. I quote, "The abolition of domestic slavery is the great object of desire in those colonies where it was unhappily introduced in their infant state. But previous to the enfranchisement of the slaves we have, it is necessary to exclude all further importations from Africa. Yet our repeated attempts to effect this by prohibitions and by imposing duties which might amount to a prohibition have been hitherto defeated by His Majesty's negative." As he went on to point out, Great Britain's king had no concern for the great injustices being done to these human beings reduced to slaves, nor did he care about the welfare of the colonies and the price they would one day have to pay for this evil. By the time the Continental Congress met in 1774, declaring independence from Great Britain, slavery had already been entrenched in the colonies for over 150 years. Benjamin Franklin organized and became president of the world's first anti-slavery society, the Pennsylvania Society for Promoting the Abolition of Slavery. He wrote the first remonstrance against slavery, which was presented to the Congress of the United States. When the Declaration of Independence was drafted by Jefferson, the slavery issue was included in the original list of grievances enumerated against the King of England. Here is a part of that 28th article in the Declaration of Independence. "He has waged cruel war against human nature itself, violating its most sacred rights of life and liberty in the persons of a distant people who never offended him, captivating and carrying them into slavery in another hemisphere, or to incur miserable death in their transportation thither. This piratical warfare, the opprobrium of infidel powers, is the warfare of the Christian King of Great Britain, determined to keep open a market where men should be bought and sold. He has prostituted his negative for suppressing every legislative attempt to prohibit or to restrain this execrable commerce." Regrettably, not all of the 13 colonies were in agreement on the slavery issue. 2 states would not sign the Declaration nor participate in the Revolution as long as the anti-slavery clause was included in the Declaration. Thus, the 28th issue in the grievances against Great Britain was deleted from the document by Congress. After the Declaration of Independence, Jefferson was free to initiate a bill in Congress, which he did in 1779, proposing an initial attempt to deal with the slavery issue. In his autobiography, he wrote, "The bill on the subject of slaves was a mere digest of the existing laws respecting them, without any intimation of the plan for a future and general emancipation. It was thought better that this should be kept back and attempted only by way of amendment. However, the bill should be brought on. The principles of the amendment, however, were agreed on, that is to say, the freedom of a slave born after a certain day and deportation at a proper age. But it was found that the public mind would not yet bear the proposition, nor will it bear it even at this day. Yet the day is not distant when it must bear and adopt it, or worse will follow." Jefferson could foresee the tremendous evil to come if the young nation did not eradicate slavery. He wrote, "It is still in our power to direct the process of emancipation and deportation peaceably and in such slow degree as that the evil will wear off insensibly. If, on the contrary, it is left to force itself on, human nature must shudder at the prospect held up. Commerce between master and slave is despotism." When the Revolutionary War against Britain had been won and the Constitutional Convention of 1787 met in Philadelphia, the slavery issue again came to the forefront. George Mason spoke frequently on the issue, believing that Congress, not the states that wished to retain slavery, should be given control over the issue. James Madison wrote the following report concerning Mason's speech: "This infernal traffic originated in the avarice of British merchants. The British government constantly checked the attempts of Virginia to put a stop to it. The present question concerns not the importing states alone, but the whole Union. Every master of slaves is born a petty tyrant. They bring the judgment of heaven on a country. As nations cannot be rewarded or punished in the next world, they must be in this. By an inevitable chain of causes and effects, Providence punishes national sins by national calamities. The Constitution, as originally drafted, gave Congress power to abolish slavery. But again, 2 southern states, knowing this would suppress slave importation, would not accept such a constitution. Thus, in the final days of the convention, the measures dealing with slavery were omitted. Consequently, George Mason refused to put his signature to the document. The Founding Fathers' great desire was to eradicate the evil of slavery, as borne out by the Constitution's original wording. It is unfortunate, however, that they were not successful in convincing all 13 states to abolish this evil system at the birth of the new nation. George Washington, President of the Constitutional Convention, freed all his slaves. During James Monroe's 2 terms as U.S. President, 1817 to 1825, he enacted Jefferson's 1779 anti-slavery bill, emancipating and deporting slaves to West Africa. It was thus that the nation of Liberia came about. Its capital, Monrovia, was named in his honor. Regrettably, the nation did not continue in the course of action advocated by its founders, and thus America would have to face the Civil War in 1861. I hope that this video has given you a better understanding of Thomas Jefferson and some of the issues concerning him. Clearly, he has been the most misunderstood and the most maligned of the Founding Fathers. We can be grateful for his remarkable contribution to this nation, the Declaration of Independence, asserting that our liberties and freedoms come from the hand of Almighty God.